hour 3. I hope everybody is hanging in there. If you just joined us, you're in for a treat. We spent the day so far starting out with a discussion around customers, getting into systems, moving into agents, and now we get to explore something that has been around much longer than most of those things, and is really critical when it comes to building breakthrough brands, and that's creativity. Joining me is Penny Pritzker, Senior Fellow at Harvard, Microsoft board member, former US Secretary of Commerce under President Obama, and a tremendous partner to us at DEPT. Hi, Penny, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, and welcome everyone. It's great to have you all here.
All right, so I think there's this massive misconception that AI is here to kill creativity, right? That speed, we talked a lot about speed actually in the panel before this around agents and speed being a huge competitive advantage that agentic AI is bringing to the table, but that speed will come at the cost of the soul of the brand, the soul of the creative. I think at DEPT we're seeing that that's not entirely the case when it's managed in the right way, and that there's this new dynamic that AI is actually a path to the democratization of good. Everybody here in this room could go create a TV commercial, and it would probably be pretty good. And that's not what's going to win. Good is no longer good enough, and I think that's what AI is doing for creativity. It's upping what is great. It's requiring great in order to be memorable and in order to break through. Penny, you've worked with some of the most visionary leaders and creators out there. How do you see creativity's role changing as technology speeds ahead?
Look, I have a very clear perspective on this. I think that the technology is helping us accelerate production, but it doesn't replace imagination. And the winners are going to be those who can embrace originality, creativity, imagination, and have enough time for wonder in their day. And in our firm, we have a sign in our main conference room that I got when I was Secretary of Commerce. It's a kind of rickety old looking sign, but I hung it up there anyway in our modern conference room. It says, "Trust your crazy ideas." And really what that says to me is you've got to leave enough room in the day for creativity and for wonder. And the technology allows for that if we use it right. If we just ask it to develop something without our input, then it's going to be generic. And that's not going to engage the customer. It's not going to be exciting. It's not going to be the thing that delights the people that we want to delight. And so I think that the real differentiator is going to be human creativity in that loop.
Yeah, and I think that's what this panel is all about. We have gathered leaders who are redefining creativity inside some of the world's most influential brands. We're going to watch a quick video and welcome Sam Lewis and our amazing panelists up to the stage. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
All right, good morning. Morning, everyone. Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Karen. I actually wanted to pick up exactly where they left off because I thought it was really powerful. Creativity, originality, wonder, crazy ideas. Feels like in a world where we've got AI-generated everything, those kind of sentiments have never been more powerful, I don't think. Because AI, by its definition, is derivative, right? It's learnt from the past. And when anyone can generate massive quantities of content on demand, as Karen and Penny were saying, the easiest and I think most dangerous thing to do is to scale sameness, right? Because that just becomes a race to the bottom, effectively. So yes, I'm Sam Lewis. I look after our creative and media clients for DEPT. where we believe that AI is not a replacement for originality, but a multiplier of it. And if 2025 was the year that generative AI commercials became pretty a la mode, we all saw the NBA Finals one, the Liquid Death parody, the sort of holiday campaign remixes, and they were simply truly impressive, right? But I think in a way they also lacked a bit of soul, and in some cases got real consumer backlash against them, right? So here we are at the start of 26 in Vegas, and we want to explore that very tension over the next half an hour or so, right? So that tension between artificial and human intelligence, between speed and soul, between generating content at scale and generating ideas that matter. And I'm very lucky to be joined by an amazing spectrum of panelists, really. So we've got representation here from right across the industry spectrum, from enterprise and consumer brands, from platforms, from media titans. Give me 2 minutes to embarrass them first. We've got Varun, who is leading Adobe GenStudio, which is really, at the forefront, I think, of enterprises governing, scaling, and automating creative production. So we're very pleased to have Varun with us. We've got Jesse, who is representing Diageo, SVP, leading all the whiskey brands at Diageo, and a former head of innovation there, so brings real kind of cultural craft and commercial rigor, I think. Bree is next to me, speaking of commercial rigor, and she is transforming Dell.com into a high-margin digital marketplace, linking major brand campaigns with a very efficient, personalized e-commerce performance engine. And last but not least, Atul is Jessica Qaasim, who's got a unique position at Google and can kind of sit at the intersection of seeing agency partners, brands, got a real front row seat to the real use cases that drive originality and growth. So please welcome all the panelists. Okay, right, let's get into it. So we all feel the shift. The technology is here and it's extraordinary, but the strategic decision really is what you put in front of it. And I guess there's real anxiety that's emerged about kind of AI slop and low quality content that's certainly flooding my feed. And the truth is that sameness scales really easily, right? But does it cut through? So that's where I wanted to start. And sort of talk about who is ultimately responsible now for protecting a brand's distinctiveness. Is it the brand, is it the agency partner, or is it this slightly new dimension of platform tool provider? Who ultimately takes responsibility? I should probably ask that question to someone. I don't know, Jesse, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure, happy to. This will shock you, but as the brand owner, I think accountability ultimately has to stay with the brand owner. So with brand teams, look, as AI inevitably becomes sort of the engine, we have to hold the steering wheel. It's kind of that simple. It's why at Diageo, the last 2 years or so, we've been building rigorous capability with AI as a system across workflows, processes, and with deep governance, because that's a really important piece of all this. I mean, I go back to accountability. I was joking with a colleague the other day saying, imagine if you had a performance presentation with the CEO and you blamed a mistake in the math on an Excel model, right? And it's kind of the same idea, I think, when we're dealing with this new world of AI and the multitude of tools and partners that we're going to have. But ultimately, the accountability has to sit with us.
And I would say we have a slightly nuanced difference there at Dell. We also manufacture AI servers, and we're very deeply integrated into what's happening in the space. And so, of course, we have governance teams that own and manage what we're going to step into, how we're going to use AI, and what are appropriate use cases based on how we're protecting customer data, how we're protecting quality and integrity of information that gets out in the market. And so there's a lot that flows through that. But I would say also we've really worked to make sure that everybody in the different business units, has a lot of autonomy and does own the outcome. So if I'm doing something that's going to integrate AI into the Dell.com public space, I am accountable for the ROI of that application, right? But working closely with a governance board to make sure that we're keeping everything above board and that above all we're protecting customers and data privacy.
I think the brands are, I would plus one what you all said, are accountable. But if you think of the agency and partner ecosystem, of course you should leverage them to, consult you on the distinctiveness for two reasons. I think agencies have that level of perspective that can help you understand. If you're actually in the middle of something, it's hard to appreciate what makes you unique. But agencies can take that macro view and give you that perspective to help, I think. So maybe they're not accountable, but definitely consulted and also responsible.
Yeah, I think just to build on that, I think like with the latest in technology, I think like you now can take like a brand model or your design language model, and now you can actually share it across, as a brand along with the agency partners. And I think there's some really interesting work, obviously, at Adobe that we're doing. We both actually are heavy into marketing, like over $1 billion of performance marketing spend, but also like, leading the way in terms of some of this more agentic and Gen AI, initiatives. And one of the things that we're seeing sort of come up as a model for great collaboration, to your point, is how can you, as a brand, codify what your brand stands for and then share it across, with the agency partners so that there is consistency. Share it across to the different regions and geographies that might be running those local campaigns. And I think with technology now, this is possible.
That's a great point, Brett. I'm sort of fascinated by how like the creative brief has changed now that creative systems and workflows are evolving. With something like GenStudio, do you feel like it's becoming less a question of kind of creative briefing or a moment in time and more about establishing brand safety guardrails that you then iterate on over time?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really great question, and I think like from my perspective, I think it's like the Renaissance time, like for when it comes to creative briefing or marketing brief and stuff. And if you just think about like the typical problems that have existed or plagued like creatives when you typically start off with the briefing process, is like, okay, what worked for this campaign? What didn't work? What performed? What didn't perform? Who was the audience we targeted? Did it actually deliver against the ROI that we promised and like the funding that we had? So I think this whole notion of like the blank slate of where do you start and do you have insights before you can actually put pen to the paper, I think that's getting solved through agents, right? So I think like if you look at most of the modern platforms now, they have like these insights agents, and Adobe has one as well, where this is just an assistant to you. You can sit there and you can say, hey, I have a brief that I'm either writing or I just got, and I want to ask some questions around what worked in the past, what campaigns actually performed, what assets performed, was it this video and across what channel? And very quickly, in a matter of minutes, you can actually start to get those insights. So that's the first thing. The other thing is like typically like we've done these like surveys or like user groups and so on and so forth to say I have these initial creative concepts I want to go and test, and so okay, that's going to take you X number of weeks or months to get the panel to show this, get your feedback. I think with sort of the innovation around synthetic audience and what you can do around digital twins, it's a huge like orders of magnitude acceleration. We talked about this upfront as we were actually opening up this panel. Acceleration in terms of getting those insights, getting things like what's going to work and not work based on some of the concepts that you have. And then I think like this form factor of like having a document, it's a PowerPoint or a PDF. Like I think like with the briefing process, what we're seeing is that it's actually better to actually bring all of these insights together on an infinite canvas and let your mind wander a little bit. So I think there's this initiative called Project Catalyze. If you haven't seen that, you just go look for it in Google from Adobe. That actually is bringing all of these things together. An insights agent on an infinite canvas, along with some synthetic audience, where you can actually start to create this next generation creative that just will turbocharge like the kind of outcomes you can get.
That sounds super interesting. Yeah, I can't wait to have a little play with that actually. Jessica, I thought I'd kind of throw it over to you on that point around, you sit at such a unique position, I think, seeing, what brands are up to, what agencies are up to, and what the kind of the value of originality kind of is right now. I wondered if you would just help us for a minute there kind of point to some signals around creativity still being the strongest driver of performance.
Yeah, I love that question. I think we touched on this a little earlier, but as AI, as it democratizes, great work, that becomes the status quo over time. People expect that great work. But really what you are able to get with your strategic advantage is when you're actually able to move forward with originality and creative work. And BCG talked about this recently in a study because originality helps you to build something called brand equity. And that is broken down into this trifecta that they call attention, recall, and trust. So from an attention perspective, we pay attention to things that really cut through the noise, right? We're hardwired to notice something that we didn't expect to see there. And then from a recollection point of view, which is incredibly important for brands as well, you're hardwired to also remember things that move you. How many of us have seen a piece of art or heard a song, you just can't get it out of your mind because it really resonated with you, like in a way, because it was so original. And the last concept that I don't think many people talk about, but I think it's really important, is trust. So, people trust, even if they don't agree with you, they trust what originality because it signals conviction, it signals a POV, it signals creativity and originality. And it reminds me of why YouTube has so many creators that have such a personal, deep relationship with their followers who they have never met. These are people that they're not just attached to because they're celebrities. It's because they have a unique POV, and they've grown to have trust with them over time. So in that way, creativity has definitely, increased in value over time because it directly affects what we pay attention to, what we remember, and then ultimately what we choose over time.
Yeah, I love that. I think that, the brand equity, that most intangible asset on a company's balance sheet is still super important today, arguably even more important, right?
Yeah.
Talking of brand equity, Jesse, Diageo have built some of the most, astonishing, well-known brands around the world, some that were probably enjoyed last night in Vegas. And I just
and after this panel, of course.
Well, yeah, and as soon as we wrap here. I wonder if, how do you maintain that brand equity, that brand's distinctiveness in a world where, we can scale sameness or anyone can generate anything overnight, as Karen was saying in the intro. I think it's a real challenge for brand managers that now, I think.
Yeah, it's a great question, and obviously one that we are all wrestling with. But I think, at the end of the day, and somebody mentioned this earlier, this is actually probably the best time to be in a creative industry, A, and B, one where you have brands, as we are fortunate to have, that have so much heritage, craft, and authenticity. Because actually, that becomes the biggest differentiator in maintaining distinctivity. Now, it's our jobs to make sure that we are the stewards of that distinctivity in a world now where we're obviously working with a wider array of tools, including AI, right? But I think that it's where the brand fundamentals really matter the most. And it's what we at Diageo, and I'm sure looking around our fellow panelists, we hold so true. So we have a really disciplined Diageo way of brand building that puts our heritage, our brand purpose, our tone of voice, our visual identity at the fore. And that's what builds distinctivity and memory structures over time, which is the consistency of that messaging. A bit to what Jessica was saying. It's the old slightly cliche marketing adage of, great marketing isn't saying 100 different things, it's saying one thing 100 times. And we have to make sure that single-minded message and that single-minded purpose is communicated in the right way and leverages the authenticity and craft that we have. And by the way, so many of our brands are, we're fortunate to have real people either currently behind them or family generations, and we can pull so much of that humanity through. Now, how we do that across an increasingly, array of capabilities and tools involving AI, that's our job to really maintain that integrity. And I think there are two really important pieces, and you touched on it a little bit too in the briefing process, which are deeply human, and I believe will always be deeply human. The first is around consumer insight. Like, do you know what's at the core of what's driving a consumer you're trying to connect with? Are you clear on the problem you're trying to address? The difference between a great brief and a great prompt isn't that significant. You have to have a clearly identified problem, a clear insight. And the second piece is around human judgment of creativity, and that gets back to how we maintain distinctivity. We need to have the right talent in our agency partners within our business that can have that judgment to make the right calls around the creativity that we're developing.
Yeah, Yeah. Brie, I want to pull you in on this because you mentioned earlier the responsibility of driving margin growth. And I'm just interested at Dell where you find, real ROI being driven by creativity, not just sort of process automation or performance, but, I guess, big creative splash versus continuous incrementality or optimization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we look at it from a couple different perspectives. I'm in a role that focuses on transforming the business primarily. So it's a change the business in terms of what you see on Dell.com, but also what are we doing for our customers? What are the programs that we're offering? And so sometimes creativity can show up in a space where we say, hey, we're seeing this customer feedback, we're seeing this problem occur or a need in the market. How can we meet that? And sometimes that's a UX experience step function change that comes. Sometimes it's, hey, we have this program that could be better. I'll give you an example. We've had a recycling program at Dell since the late 90s. And then we put our toes in the water of a device trade-in program where a customer could get credit back for their aged equipment. And we went, hey, this is a really valuable program, not only for keeping technology responsibly rehomed, but then also for the customers and from a loyalty perspective. So what more could we do there? Well, hey, we could buy back those devices, and actually we could buy back any brand of device because we have the ability to refurb and resell that out in the marketplace. So we'll transform this program. And then in order to launch this and make sure that this isn't just falling into sort of the banner blindness and the minutia of every seasonal promo that pops up and every different message we've got on the site, we'll go, hey, we want to put this out there in a way that's visually different, that shows that we are being intentional about creating this program. We're relying on our long-standing heritage of being really, really responsible with the way that we handle technology and end of life of that technology. And then we want to come forward with a space that's interactive, that's easy to use, that really simplifies that process for the customer. It's not only driving high customer loyalty, it's giving purchasing power back to the customer, but then we're doing something really great for the industry. And then you look at a lot of the refurb demand that's coming in from various businesses, and especially when you start looking at EMEA and some of the Nordic countries where they're actually requiring it. And I believe the US is not far off from that as well. And so we think about creativity in terms of, hey, these are programs and offerings that the customers are demanding, but also how we go to market has to be visually different so that we can break through some of the noise and the clutter there. We have to do something that's of high value. And then I have the great privilege of working with a bunch of PhD behavioral scientists that are taking in that customer data, that feedback, using AI tools to help analyze that data, but there's still this very robust human element where we're patenting research models. We're bringing that data into something that's truly actionable so that then I can go and refresh an experience, bring it to life, use some great agency partners to help us think about how do we get this to resonate with our customers? How do we simplify this process so that I'm not putting more hurdles in the way of the customer? We can lose ourselves in these micro iterations, and it takes great agency partners to help us just push ourselves out of our own ways sometimes. And so that's a lot of the value that we find with folks like DEPT especially. Just get us out of our way, get us out of our own heads so that we can do something measurably different. And that's where we see the biggest return on effort and attention and certainly investment.
I love that example. I think, real tangible use cases of using technology, AI, to drive growth in ways that were hitherto not possible. I think if 2025, if the prevailing narrative was a little bit glass half empty, I think, about AI at times, do you know what I mean? It was all about efficiencies and automating humans out of the picture and things like that. I think getting more positive growth stories like that out is hopefully what we'll get more of in 2026. Actually, Jesse, I think you mentioned Diageo are doing some stuff maybe like around packaging or...
Yeah, I mean, we're early days, but we've got a really, really cool technology that we're calling Halo that effectively allows us to use AI, oftentimes in collaboration with artists, to create unique one-of-one bespoke designs. So it's using AI to convert to actual sales. We've done this on one of the brands that I have the pleasure of running, Johnny Walker, which I'm sure many of you have also had the pleasure of experiencing. we recently, across Dubai Airport, Miami, and then also Edinburgh, our brand home, we've begun to roll out this really, really cool platform where, again, we're partnering with an artist. They imagine a cityscape in their style, and then we're using AI to quite literally create unique one-of-one expressions that consumers can take home with them, in a matter of minutes effectively after purchase. It's been incredibly well received, and I think just a really great example of how we can use sort of Gen AI, IRL to drive, sales in real time.
Great, I love that. Jessica, you always have a couple of great examples whenever I speak to you. You get to see brands kind of re-engineering creative workflows end to end. What's kind of interesting you about the kind of creative use cases right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it points to something you said earlier, Sam. I think the most compelling AI use cases aren't necessarily the ones just about efficiency, right, or doing things faster. I think there are those use cases that really come from bolder work, more courageous work that otherwise you wouldn't have been able to do. And that type of work generally has three characteristics for me. So the first is use cases with AI that help increase the scope of whatever you're doing, things that help increase your agility as a team, and then lastly, things that also help you to build a performance flywheel so that you're doing something great once, but also scalable over time in a repeatable framework. And my favorite example of this, just because once I heard it, I couldn't get out of my head, was actually DEPT's Pit Viper case study that launched this earlier this year, where they had the challenge of reintroducing this brand. For those of you not familiar with Pit Viper, it's like a sunglasses company. They're bold, they're irreverent, and their tagline is, whatever you think of, the word party, whatever that means to you, like they want that customer. They want you to be their customer when you're partying. So think on the ski slopes, hanging out with your friends at 3 a.m., as all of us probably do. So that's their favorite, what they're trying to do and introduce their brands to. And I say that because the challenge was quite high, because that type of audience, they don't like boring creative, right? They are not going to go for the status quo. And what I really like what the team did is that they used AI to first help amplify some of the initial ideas, right, that the team came up with. So they started with their own set of creative ideas, and then they used AI to kind of expand that scope. And then the second, in terms of agility, they actually produced the campaign within 4 weeks as a part of Google's Impossible Ad campaign, and then also leveraged Gemini to help with things like ad copy and accelerating some of that work, and then VO to bring some of the case studies to life with video. And then last but not least, they created this flywheel with YouTube AI-powered campaigns on DV360. And in the end, I think there are two really things I want to call out there. One is the results were, I think it was 6% increase in ad recall for your target customer. But in addition to that, I just love that the use case shows that AI isn't just about doing the status quo faster, right? It's about, unlocking bolder ideas, more courageous ideas. And I think where some of the ideas, one was like someone like skiing with what was it, like meat or something like that on the campaign. Who thinks of that? Was that your idea, Sam?
Yeah, I'll definitely take the credit.
Yes.
Yeah. Given that you like it.
Yeah.
I want to, just slightly pivot us there into what we're touching on a bit, which I guess a few people might be wrestling with right now, which is these modern creative systems, right? I sort of think in a way it's never been harder to be in marketing because you've got so many channels, attention's so fragmented. The technology is honestly moving faster than anyone can keep up with it. How do you develop, Varun, I'm going to come to you on this because you're developing these workflows so specifically and intentionally at Adobe. But how do you kind of build those workflows and systems so that they're, brand distinctive, but also protecting against, legal or any brand damage, of course, but any kind of legal or IP risks or anything like that?
Yeah, I think Bree touched upon this earlier on in terms of Dell having a governance council and codifying some of those things. But when you think like a product like GenStudio, I think we've been building it for the past 2 years. And one of the things that we do is we have Customer Zero, which is our marketing organization that always uses new technology that we're building. So, the first iteration of this was us taking all of the brand guidelines, and Jesse also mentioned this. What he's doing with his team is, all of the stuff around tone of voice, channel guidelines, image, illustration guidelines, photography guidelines, and so on and so forth. And what we find is that these models are really, really good at following these instructions. So what we've done in product like GenStudio is that we take all of these explicit brand guidelines, that are, documented, and codify a model. And then you say, okay, create a piece of content, be it text or image or video, based on what these guidelines are. And we found that, these models are pretty good, but like the learning we had was that, with most things around AI, they're not perfect, right? And because they're not perfect, what we did was we evolved these applications to actually be more adversarial. By that I mean, we now have like sort of two models. One model, we say, here's the brand guidelines, go create all of this content, text, copy, images, video. There's another model, we say, your job is to take these guidelines, the exact same guidelines that we gave to the first agent, but now your job is to actually critique what was created by the first model and then give it a score between 1 and 100 and explain yourself when it's actually a score less than 100, why is it that you are rating this at a lower threshold than what the first model created? And this architecture, this adversarial architecture of one model creating it, the other one critiquing it, has been really, really fascinating. So now I think like we've got like one of the largest brands in the world, they're like standardized on GenStudio and they're actually using this application. And if you want to see this, like if you just search for Adobe GenStudio for performance marketing on Google and you'll find some YouTube videos and stuff that actually does that. So I think like that was, I would say, the first generation of generative AI, like the past, like, I would say like, 12 to 24 months that we've lived in. But, what we started to realize, I would say in the last like 3 to 6 months was that something was missing. And I think this is exactly what the panel is coming is that creativity is an innately sort of human skill. And what we found was that brand guidelines often represents less than 50% of what the creative is. Right? We started to look at like these campaigns that these creative teams told us were like really amazing, right? And we gave them to the same model and we said score them, and they were all over the place. Like, wait a second, like you're actually saying there are certain things that are better than what you are giving us as guidelines. Why is that the case? Well, the reason is that creativity is as much art as it is science, and you actually can't write it down in a piece of document. So now we have the best brains, similar to what Bree was saying. We've got, fortunate enough to have like a huge set of researchers, these PhDs who, really understand computer vision and such. And we are working on the next frontier of how actually can you codify all of these things, the implicit guidelines, not the explicit, but implicit. Nobody's actually said that. But because this campaign worked really, really well, and we know that computer vision is one of the best use cases of large language models, we can feed all of these images, all of these videos, all of this campaign content into the model and say, now take what was written in the explicit guidelines. You have now inferred based on hundreds of thousands of assets that actually been trafficked, and now start to recommend and start to tell us like what great looks like. So I think that's the next frontier, and it's like really fascinated with like some of the advancements that we're doing there, and what we'll start to see pretty soon.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think that kind of adversarial technique. I think building in some variance within your your design systems, like where the human in the loop comes in. Funnily, like I think that actually playing it safe is the most dangerous thing to do right now, right? Because it's like if we have a sea of sameness, if we have a barrier to entry of creating creative content, which has been so lowered, you could and should be taking like some risks, right? And if you don't, then I think the real challenge is that you're honestly going to be wasting your media money because it won't be working very effectively. Bree, you're sort of nodding to Varun's points there. I don't know if you wanted to build on it.
Yeah, I love that you said that creativity is just so inherently human. I think that's really important for us. We forget sometimes that so are our customers. They're humans, and we are solving inherently human problems. And I might be a marketplace of one, but I have an experience as a consumer that I can lean on. We'll get the teams together, and typically I love to bring people together that don't have expertise in a particular area that I want to look at improving. And we'll have sort of a scrub session, right? We'll walk through a journey and say, okay, pretend you're shopping for a replacement battery for your Latitude 5450, right? go through that process and tell me how easy or hard it is to find that. And I love hearing feedback from people who don't actually manage the Latitude pages, right? Like, get out of your space and give me feedback for you as a human trying to find and accomplish a task. And what are you seeing? I'll put stuff in front of my mom and my sister all the time too. Like, hey, look at this. Tell me what you think of this, because they're consumers. And you know, we work in a lot of B2B spaces, but they're humans also, and small businesses behave a lot like consumers, and we forget about that. So I tend to think that we've got to get more of that brain power, that human creativity put against, and use the AI to automate things that are not inherently human, right? Use that for efficiency. We have a lot of versioning we have to do. We're in commerce in a little over 30 countries, but we have sites in 220 plus countries that need content updates. There's a lot that can be automated there, and that's great. It frees up people so that I can use them where they're really valuable, which is for their unique creativity and for their thought process. And hey, look at this experience and give me your feedback. I love watching user testing sessions and listening to customers sort of narrate their way through a journey. It is so fascinating because they see things that I don't see. As much as I'll try to get myself out of, I know too much. I'm too ingrained in this. This is the same reason we bring in agencies. They don't know possibly what we do, and we get so stuck in, well, we tested this 5 years ago and it failed, and so we're not going to try it again. Well, the market has changed in 5 years, and holy smokes, is it changing with advancements in AI. I mean, leaps and bounds. And so something I tested 6 months ago, I would actually go and say, hey, let's do this again, but with these tweaks. Because 6 months ago, it was a different world, right? We're just evolving so quickly. And so we've got to just embrace the humanness of creativity. And I think that's what will keep us on track.
Yeah, well, I'm very glad you sort of brought us to the focus on humanity. I mean, very good news for all the humans in the room. And I guess there's a bit of an underlying question here, which is, like there is exactly to your point, like a risk to some roles in marketing and in creative. And I don't know, Jesse, what are you guys thinking? What are the kind of most at-risk roles, and how are we going to sort of deploy, our more strategic thinking moving forward?
Yeah, first of all, I love what you talked about in terms of freeing up more time. Because I think that at the crux of it should be what we're most excited about, which is using AI to free up time, to whether it's processes and workflow, whether it's getting to, one of the most successful things we've found with AI is our internal studio, where we're largely creating creative assets off existing brand guidelines, diversion across geographies. We've done something like 75,000 creative assets, at a speed that we never could have imagined a few years back. But so I think truthfully, in a sort of its broadest sense, the roles that are going to be at most risk are going to be ones that don't embrace AI as an enabler of freeing up time, of creating more space to think more creatively, to think more strategically. If I think about brand management broadly, to think more holistically about your brand as a business. And I think, it's almost like, imagine interviewing somebody today or in a few days or in a few months, and they said to you, I don't really like to use email. You'd be like, AI is going to be the same thing. We need future marketers to be fluent in AI and seeing AI as an enabler, something that empowers them, and is part of their overall skill set as a marketer. So, and I think, look, there's a piece around execution, sort of focus roles. Those are probably more at risk from all the conversations we've been having. But generally, I think it's we have to embrace AI as an enabler.
Varun, I'm kind of interested in your point of view here from where you're sitting. What do you think is going to be the next kind of creative craft or the next leap in creative technology, or how you would be evolving or advising creative leaders moving forward, how to upskill themselves or their team, or
Yeah. No, I think like I'll give you a real example of in the marketing organization at Adobe, about 6 or 9 months ago, we released this new set of Firefly models. It's for image creation, video, and so on and so forth, vector graphics. And what we found was that when we had AI first designers, these are like relatively younger, like folks coming out of the college and stuff, like they were more curious in terms of like pushing these models around the boundaries and like getting the output out of them. So one of the things that we've done is that for a number of these marketing and creative teams that we have that are running these campaigns, we are actually hiring these AI first designers, younger folks that are actually starting to say like, hey, you can actually use these products in very interesting ways, and they're naturally very curious, and they are helping, through osmosis, get some of the other folks that have tons of real great experience, but might be a bit more narrow in terms of the way they were doing things to like start to explore these things. So I think like that's one thing that we're starting to do. I think like when it comes to the copywriters and stuff, at Adobe, I think like leveraging some of the tools that we just talked about around GenStudio, I think we want the first set of ideas, the first set of like those creative concepts to come there, and then for the copywriters to then augment them, make them much better. So I think like acceleration in that is great. And we've actually gone and trained them in terms of like what's the best way to use these tools, how to use them in the context of the workflow, how can you rely upon all of these agents. So I think that's been a big part of it. And I think like we've actually leveraged like a lot of like video content. I think like internally we probably built around 400, 500 different videos. These are all like bite-sized chunks, like 5-minute things, and you take like 10 of these, and then we have like these quizzes, and everyone that's in the team, as well as new the people that we are hiring, they're actually taking these courses, and and we are trying to refresh them on a regular basis. And then I would say when it comes to the folks who are building these design systems, right? So like some of these are codified and in tools like Illustrator and Figma and others and stuff, is like we're actually having these folks revisit these tools and saying, if you were to scale this design system for some of these AI models to leverage them, how would you like sort of rebuild them so that agents can actually better sort of learn from them? So this is where like we're actually getting some of our design system thinkers in our marketing and creative teams to work with our research team to sort of tell them like how to actually create what an ideal ad and different renditions of that would look like, so that it's easier for these AI models to pick them up and do variants around that. So
Great, I love it. Thank you. Very, very strong advice for creative leaders in the room. I think we're nearly time to wrap. We might have time for a question or two from the floor. I don't know if I can see.
I have a microphone, so let me get to you.
Oh yeah, Kristen's got a microphone there. So if anyone had a question for the panel, then stick your hand up and Kristen will pop round.
Jessica, you talked about how originality helps build brand equity and that the ads that worked best are the ones that people remember. I think your exact words were that we pay attention to things that cut through the noise. And when I heard that, I thought about a recent Nielsen study from last year of about 6,000 respondents, which showed that viewers had lower rates of recall when watching AI-generated advertisements, and also that people were generally accurate in picking out which ads used AI. Given these facts, how can creative teams using AI avoid producing content that becomes part of that noise?
Great question. I got nervous when I saw you reading. I was like, oh my God, what is he going to ask? But no, I think that's a great question. I think I would answer it in two ways. I think usually people look at AI and they think, okay, AI is for execution and scale, and then humans are for strategy and direction. And when you look at that in such a black and white manner, I think that in lies the mistake. I think humans need to be involved throughout the entire process, not the same way that they were involved in, let's say, 2019, but I think truly should be involved in the entire process end to end. So Google and BCG did a study recently and showed that actually when you're partnering between AI and humans together throughout the entire value chain, those customers are actually seeing 60% more in brand growth, revenue growth over time. And I'll end by saying, I think with creative and AI, I think it's important to realize that AI makes you more efficient and more effective, but ultimately it makes you more you. It's not just there to create more work, it's also there to create more people in the world who come alive in their work and are excited about the work that they're doing and solving real challenges. But it's really important that we don't check out during any part of the process because of that AI. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. We've got time for one more, I think, probably. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you, everyone. Great session that was there. I'm going to make it very quick, but Jesse, you mentioned a great example of being able to personalize bottles, have that integration with artists into personalizing bottles and so forth. I'd love to think about how you are viewing creators when you think about how you can scale creativity with the AI tools that are available and so forth. And you have creators on the other side that can help you go ahead and give a more of a high touch, more intimate sort of interaction with the audience. What is the balance that you see between those two?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. I'll open it up to other panelists as well. But I think, look, the bespoke bottle example I gave is a perfect example of that. In terms of we work with creators or across markets. We're not actually asking them to do that much, other than to give us a sort of inspiration that then takes on a world of its own in a bespoke manner. And I think we're going to look to do that more and more often. I think it's a great sort of case study in terms of how you can, again, leverage an artist and then use AI to make limitless, pieces of art inspired by them, and then again give consumers not just a reason to purchase, but give consumers an enduring connection to the brand. A brand like Johnnie Walker is rooted in progress. It has been since its inception years ago, and this is just a way again of modernizing and taking that forward.
Great. Well, listen, thank you. Just as a closing remark, I think we've done a pretty good job of hopefully making the case that the future of growth is creative, and that AI is, albeit the system and a very impressive one, but the idea remains the engine, and a human-focused one at that. But the importance of remaining brand distinctive and brand safe and building brand equity over time is and will remain the key driver of growth. So just wanted to thank all of my fantastic panelists for joining me today, and thank you all for joining us too. I hope you had a good time, and good luck with the rest of the week.